Welcome to the Steady On Stronger Together podcast. I am your host, Angie Bauman. If you've been listening to conversations I foster for any time at all, you likely have picked up on the struggle I have to use my voice. That may sound crazy coming from someone who literally uses her voice all the time to write and teach and preach and podcast, but it is absolutely true. I learned a long time ago that people are happier with me when I take up minimal space, and so even when I speak, I have at times worked to speak small. But God is growing me, asking me to trust Him, reminding me that my voice is not too big for Him, reassuring me that He will hold me close when opposition arises. I'm still learning. And part of that learning is listening to people like Dr. Trisha Welstad. If you've ever wondered if you have something to say, or known you do have something to say yet struggled to say it, I think you'll feel loved and supported by what Trisha shares with you today. Let's listen in. Good afternoon, Steady On community. Welcome to this Stronger Together conversation. I'm Angie Bauman, and I'm joined today by Dr. Trisha Welstad. Trisha, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on the Steady On page.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
We're going to talk today about finding your voice and believing in your voice and walking out our unique identity, which is what Trisha works so much with people on. Trisha is an ordained elder in the Free Methodist Church. She is an executive director at the Leadership Center. Will you tell us what that means? What's the Leadership Center?
Yeah, the Leadership Center is an organization that I started about, we're coming up on 10 years. And it is essentially an equipping space for people who are in the process of discerning their sense of calling, but then also doing a lot of work with people on diversity, equity, and inclusion, telling the stories around people walking out their vocation and doing that in equitable ways.
You talk a lot to people about the importance of finding, I don't know if that's fair, finding and using and having confidence in their voice. What are some of the reasons you think that we struggle to believe in and use our voice?
So I think just to frame that a little bit, like defining our voice is really, I would say probably if I phrased it differently, it would often be helping people find their sense of identity, like who we are, and then walk that out in the world. And that's what I feel like my calling really is and the word calling comes from the idea of vocation or voice. So it all ties together really. But this idea of finding out who we are and walk and like really understanding that within the context of the layers of our family, our history, our culture, our gender, all our religious space, all of those things. Some of those can be layers that keep us from being honest, and some of those can be layers that are helpful at different times, just kind of depending on how healthy or toxic those things can be, and those spaces and people can be. So I would say sometimes we struggle to find and use our voice to be our full self because of the limitations of unhealthy space that we've dwelled in. Whether it be others that have put limiting tapes in our minds, is kind of how I think of it. Old school to say tapes, like just lines, quotes, like you're not enough, or you're not this, or you're not that, or you couldn't be a leader. Like asking or saying those things, and then those things stick with us. I think that's been something I've walked through a lot to undo, and helping other people to do that as well is something that I spend a bit of time on, because when we believe the not truth about who we are or the limitations, then it keeps us from even finding the honest space of who we are.
Why do you think we hang on to those things the way we do? Because I agree with you. I think that I replay some of the either criticism or what am I looking for, the things that have like stripped away my confidence. I replay those and it keeps me scared or small, I think sometimes. Why do we do that as women, as people? Why do we hang on to those things, you think?
Well, I have multiple things that came to mind, but I would say the thing that I feel like is kind of the center of it. I think that some of those things become labels of shame. So they are, I am statements. Like, I am not enough is one that's, I think, probably typical for a lot of people. I've been in that space. Or I'm not smart, or I'm not capable. I'm not a leader. I'm too old. Like, all of these different kinds of um, statements, that those are not behavior statements. Those are character statements. They're like statements that are just, if you own those, then they keep you from moving, because it's a state of being that you then take on. And so I think we hold them for a couple of reasons. One is because it tends to be rooted in shame. And so then we don't know how to unlock that and get out of it. And then the other is because in some way, and this seems like counter, like not, it doesn't seem right, but they work for us.
Yeah.
If I'm too old, then I'll find another way. I don't have to actually push through the barrier because I'm just too old. Like, I can't change that. So I guess I'll just have to do this other thing. And then we can blame other people, or we can just say, well, that doesn't work, and we'll just move on. And it's like we're renegotiating our unhappiness.
So how do we start to unlock that? I like that word that you used. How do we begin to take steps away from that thinking and believe something different about ourselves?
I think a lot of it has to do with kind of retracing our steps back. Where did I first hear that? Where did that come from? Like, was that true, or was that just what was that placement of that? Was that coming out of someone else's pain? Was that coming out of my own pain? So kind of going back through, and it's like retracing the steps of the brokenness. But that's hard. See, again, like, we could stay there because then we don't have to touch the old and the hurting pieces. It's really hard, I think, for people to even get to those limiting beliefs, because it's like, well, I didn't realize I had those. And then once you start to touch them, they're sensitive, they hurt. And one of my professors one time said that like doctors, they palpitate different places to see where the pain is, to be able to heal, to work with you towards your healing. And I think that that's kind of that same thing. You have to find the pain spot to be able to heal the pain spot, and then to be able to just name it. I think, at least in my own life, naming things that I have kind of known, felt, the story that I believed, if you will, what was under the surface that I wouldn't even say out loud. Like, oh, I'm not very smart. But where did I get that from? Like, those kinds of questions, or statements, and then asking the question of like, oh wait, where did I get that from? And now that I'm saying that, and I think about it, that's not even true. Like, it's coming from a lot of emotion too. And so, like, trying to do the reckoning between all the things we feel back here, the things we know up here in our brain, and pulling them together. And when we start to speak it, we start to kind of pull the two together and unlock what's not true and what is true. And it's like kind of untangling the wires.
But we have to be willing to say it, right? And go to that place. I got this from Brene Brown. I take no credit for this. I think you and I've talked about Brene Brown before. But she says, the story I'm making up is, and that has helped me so much, because sometimes my own mental playlist, if you will, that tape that you were talking about, is creating an understanding of something that actually I don't have all the facts to create that story. And so sometimes I actually can interrupt that by kind of applying that to myself. And I'll even say it out loud. My husband laughs at me now because he knows what I'm doing when I'm like, the story I'm making up is, because then, like you said, when you say that out loud, the story I'm making up is I'm too stupid to do that, or I don't deserve to have that, or whatever, or that you think I'm big about that. I'm making up a story that Trisha thinks this about me, when based on what, Ange, and that has helped me a ton I have not arrived, but it like stops it, because it does seem sometimes when you say it out loud, it does seem ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I get that from. Is Brene Brown on resilience. You can be a resilient person if you can just verbalize the thing, like, the story I'm telling myself is this. And when I actually say that out loud, I'm like, well, that is wackadoodle. Like, what? That is going on there? So, yeah.
You know what else she says? I'm sure it's her that, and this has helped me a lot too, is to talk to myself the way I would talk to my child, right? Or I don't remember how she says it exactly, but I ask myself sometimes with that, when that mental playlist is on repeat, would I say this to one of my children? No. If my child finds themselves in this situation, or if my child wanted to try this, like to use more like what we're talking about today, if my child wanted to take a risk and try something, would I talk them out of it using the same kind of language that I'm using to myself to talk myself out of it right now? What do you believe is the reason, or one of the reasons, to try to take steps forward and begin the process? What are we missing when we don't? What do we gain when we try?
Well, we all lose if you're not yourself. Like, if I don't show up in the fullness of who I am made to be, who God has made me to be, then not only do I miss out most of all, but the rest of the world misses out on all the gifts and all the presence and all the goodness of who I am, all the seriousness, all the justice, all of the stuff that God put in me, as the imago Dei in me, the character qualities, the gifts, all of that stuff. If I'm like hunkered down, limited, then no one gets it. Not me and not anyone else.
I think when you were talking about that, I'm like, so many voices I respect so much. I'm so grateful for them. But I'll just be honest, it rarely, if ever, occurs to me that my voice could have that kind of impact in someone else's life. Why do we do that to ourselves? I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question. We just sorted it, but I'm so grateful that other people would be willing to be heard.
I was just reading, because I'm writing this class for Wesleyan school right now, and I'm writing about calling, and I was rereading the story of Moses. He is the worst. He's the worst. Moses didn't want to go. God's like negotiating with him. God's so kind. And Moses is like, I can't do that. I killed a guy. I can't talk.
What if they don't listen to me? I overtalked you. Sorry. But like, his questions are so childish, immature. And you're just like, but they're the same as mine.
Yes. But then we all exonerate the outcomes of Moses and forget about the calling. Like, we forget about the fact that he killed a guy and the fact that he had no dad, like all these different things that were a part of his life, or weren't a part of his life, that he didn't feel good about being called, that he wasn't raised in the Israelite home. Like, he was in a whole space that was, he could and did have all of these self-limiting beliefs. And he's no better than we are. He just made it into the Bible.
So true. I know so many stories, contemporary stories, that I'm like, that would be a good Bible story today. Like, I mean, they totally would. Yeah. That's where they were. I mean, I believe in the power of God's word. I'm not trying to minimize that in any way, shape, or form, but there's a reason that there's so many stories about people who are just people. One of my favorite things about Moses, when I studied it a couple years ago, or Exodus more in depth a couple years ago, and I've said this before, but in chapter 3, where you're talking about with the burning, all the questions, who am I? Who are you? Why are you sending me? Where am I going? What if they don't listen to me? Just all those kind of questions. And then you fast forward through all those experiences. And by the time you get to chapter 33, where he's talking about it's time to go, I love this, because Moses's only like question / statement is, if you're not going, don't send us. Like, that's, by that point, that's all he cares about. And I'm like, that progression is something that I think, even like, as we're talking about our identity, our voice, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and this kind of speaks to it already, is, you said we all lose. I can't exactly remember how you said we are all better when we use our voice, right? It's just an example of that, because the people had this leadership, not just in a man, but in a man connected to God, to where he was willing to say, it's not me doing this, it's you. And isn't that the truth of our identity? I want you to speak to that, where we get to a point really where we're able to say, it's not me that needs to do this, it's you in me. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, the thought for me is that it's a surrender. Like, Moses just wasn't really willing to surrender at the beginning. he was going his own way. He felt inadequate, lots of limitations. And so he's like, I don't know about this. But then the same is true for us. Like I sometimes say we just have to get over ourselves. Like we just have to let it go. Like I have to surrender. Like I'm not in control of the life I think I'm in control of, my own or anybody else's for that matter. But there's this sense of like, I just gotta like trust and take a risk. I'm just gonna I have to do that. That actually, I think that answers your question from earlier. We struggle because we aren't willing to take a risk, and in some of the ways to move in that direction, we have to be willing to try. And I heard someone recently say, like, we think about all the reasons why we can't or it won't work, but maybe we need to consider like how it might work. Like, what if we actually succeed? And if we realize that failures are actually the things that teach us the most, then it's worth it to start to step forward. So we have to kind of let go of the tight control we hold over ourselves and realize, and goodness, this year has been one of those years where in the season still even, we realize, I'm not in control of a lot of things. And the more we think that we are, the more we fool ourselves. And so being willing to I mean, literally, I put my hands up so many times this year and said, God, I surrender. I'm going to go where you call me to. This is what walking by faith is surrendering, taking the risk and hoping that the ground finds me underneath my feet.
I've heard this before and I resonate with this. I'm curious if you do, or maybe some of the people that you work with, how would you speak to this? Because I do think we're afraid of failure. I think we're afraid to take the risk because we're afraid of failing. I sometimes think we're also afraid of not failing. True? What would you say about that?
Yeah. There's a book called The Art of Possibility. It's a really fun book. It's very whimsical. I read it a long time ago now. But they talk about this maybe succeeding and being too big. And so then if I'm too big, now what do I do with myself? And so yes, the short answer for that is yes. But I think that if we just limit ourselves, then we don't have to think about it at all.
We don't have to risk either way. Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I don't want to deal with all that. But the reality is God has called us. God has called us to respond to God. God has made us a certain way and called us to live in particular ways and general ways in the world. And we're actually doing a disservice to our Creator and who we've been created to be, if we're not willing to take risks, if we're not willing to tune in, like listen, and then move in a way that's going to be uncomfortable.
We don't like uncomfortable. I don't know what to say to that. You just stopped and I'm like, but uncomfortable, but then what, Trisha?
But I think that's actually really good for us. I think all of the big things in history, the discomfort, the tension, goodness, I have lived in a lot of uncomfortable space of late. And I'm literally thinking of a conversation I was a part of very recently within the last few weeks, where I felt very uncomfortable in the space. And I knew, because of the context, I needed to hold it. Like I needed to just be with it. I needed to not self-soothe, because my self-soothing was placating what God was teaching me in that space.
I wondered if anyone is listening that's kind of shaking their head like, I don't even know what it means to use my voice. I didn't pose this question to you ahead of time, but I wondered if you would speak to that for just a minute, because I live in a world of Christian communicators and pastors. And so we use our voice a lot to speak, to write. I use my voice to do interviews and podcasts and hopefully send some good things out in the world. It's not the only way God calls me to use my voice. There are other ways that this is easy and that's harder. So I do this instead. Like I'm just being honest about that. Right. But those aren't the only ways. Using your voice doesn't mean like big always in the way the world defines big. Let me put that little, what are some ways when you say use your voice, what does that look like with some of the people you work with or your experience?
Okay. I'm going to answer a different question first.
Okay.
I think that it's important to understand that a voice means listening. like that if we use our voice, to know our voice, we must listen. And again, I'll just reference lots of books, I suppose, today. Parker Palmer wrote Let Your Life Speak, and it's listening for the voice of vocation. And it's really listening to our life, listening to the Spirit of God, listen well to then know how to act. And I mean, a calling, a voice, all of that it takes listening to then move. And so the ways that we can use our voice are myriad, because our voice, and if you have listened for the voice of God, you know that it is not always audible. You know that sometimes it's just a moment of, aha, I know this now. Like, I know in me, this is a truth, or this is a thing, or I have an experience sometimes in a vision, or lots of different ways. So we know that the voice is not only coming through one audible projection, and it also doesn't go out in one audible projection. So sometimes that voice for people looks like presence. I think some of the strongest ways that we can be a voice or be who we are in the world is to be present with someone else without saying a word. To be a calm, non-anxious presence with people. To be present with them regardless of what they're going through, or with what they're going through. So that's one thing that anyone can do. I think that there's all sorts of different ways that we can speak of. For justice, I think is probably one thing that probably rises in people's minds. People maybe then think of teaching, preaching, those kinds of things. But there's also this active being with. Incarnation is what I think of a lot, is of going and being with people, and doing so with all of the fruit of the Spirit alongside you. So
I love that you said that. And thank you for saying it that way, because I feel like sometimes I live in a world that's so like loud with voices, but sometimes I can't hear the true voice that I long to hear, even with all the noise. We don't always need to use our voices to speak. Sometimes we're called to speak up. Sometimes we're called to speak out. Sometimes we're called to speak in ways, like you said, that are much quieter, much smaller, and much larger at the same time. Because I think our idea of big or small is so tainted by the expectations of culture or something.
yeah, I was just on a call with a bunch of chaplains in training earlier today, and their ministry is one of presence. Like, they are present with people. They're not the doctors. They're not physicians. They are people who are there to listen, to offer prayer, scripture, but not to involve their own person into someone else's trauma often, but to be able to be a holy presence alongside them.
And yet their voice is so important, right? Their presence voice. I'm so grateful for your clarification around that. That's just beautiful, because we're not all built to be the one, I don't know, doing the talking. And that's okay too. And I think we can misunderstand voice sometimes, because voice can sound, find your voice, use your voice, can sound very like almost aggressive or something. And I think a lot of times the most effective ways that we use our voice are the ways when, like you said, it's our presence, not our words. Yeah. So all that to say, then what are some of the voices that have been really influential in your life, in your calling, that have helped you feel the passion or feel your own calling to help people do this better? Where does that come from in you?
I would say that probably my youth pastors, like way back, and they even still, we have a good relationship today. They saw in me the ability to lead when a lot of people didn't. Like, I just was like loud, like, speaking of voice, like I was just making jokes all the time and was a bit loud, but I had this tenderheartedness, this sensitivity, and they helped me to connect that with Jesus.
I love that, because it reminds me of the influence we can have in younger people too, because I think when we can say positive things in the lives of younger people, we can help at least counter those early messages that you were saying, right? Those you're not enough messages, whatever those are. But we can be a voice in the lives of other people to say, that's not what I see.
Right. And also they were a consistent presence with me. And so that changed how I saw ministry, like the whole idea of why people do ministry and what it looks like and all of that was influenced by them. And so a ministry of presence to me in answering my questions and being, silly and all the things guiding me towards the Bible and prayer and spirituality, all the stuff.
And I think it's really important to for people who are able to use their voice and then speak to us about using our voice, whatever that ends up looking like, or that we can encourage each other on the way. Because I think this is, what do you think about this? I think this is maybe for me, at least, it has been a gradual process and is an ongoing process. I use my voice better today than I did 5 years ago. I hopefully will use my voice better 5 years from now than I am today, because I will have a greater confidence in who I am. And like Moses in those chapters, right? I'll have more experience with God that will continue to affirm that I get worried that I have to do this. That's why Moses had those questions, right? I can't do this. And it's a gradual process, I think, for us to realize it was never yours to need to do. But I do anyway, let go of that slowly.
Because I'm a metaphor person, if you haven't been able to tell already. I was thinking of like regulating, like I've learned how to self-regulate better over time. Like I think about my little kids that I have. And when my 2-year-old is having a hard time, the world's on fire. Like everything is crazy. And when my 5-year-old or almost 5-year-old is having a hard time, he's like that, but he's like learned to regulate and just say a bit more of what he needs most of the time. And for me, being many years older than both of them, most of the time I can self-regulate and hear and say what I need and what I don't need. But I think that you're right. Like over time, like I was thinking of the age and over time, like some of that is developmental, some of that is spiritual, and listening to the Spirit to go, oh, it's time to amplify. Oh, it's time to be quiet. Like that, there's a discernment. And over time, I think that's the over time and continuing to grow over time. And I hope too that I have grown a bit more over the last 5 and many other years.
Yeah.
That I can discern more clearly the Spirit saying, oh, no, Trisha, now is the time to talk. Like, now's the time. Like, don't be quiet. You want to be quiet, right? You're going to stuff something down that I'm telling you, speak out about, or be present. Like, no, you need to text that neighbor and see how they're doing. You need to do this thing right now. Or no, that's actually too far. It's not your turn to save them. It's my turn. Like, it's never your turn to save them. You just be present. And you don't need to try to intervene in this situation with your family. Or
I find this to be a very big issue. It's complicated. It's deep. Could you give us just some practical steps? If someone's listening, I'd love to hear what you have to say also, just for myself. If this is a struggle, if it's something that we have insecurities, this doesn't feel comfortable, it's not something we've leaned into very much before, what are some ways that we can begin to be curious about it, if you will, and maybe take some steps to asking questions of ourselves and of God? What does this mean? What might this look like in my life?
I think that we need to find safe people that will encourage us. I think that's a big piece of this, is finding those safe people that will say, well, actually, you do have some things to say. Like, they'll note that, they'll say it, and then encouraging us, but not pushing us. That's not their job either. I think the steps wise, I think it's also, it's just, we pray, we ask, we have to get over the fact that like we might fail or we might succeed, like that whole space of it's okay. Like just saying that out loud, it's okay. If I fail, it's okay. And if I succeed, that's okay too. I'm not required to figure out the future. I'm required to be faithful in this moment. And so if I'm struggling in this moment, again, there's a lot of investigation we get to do in our own life if we're willing to do it. that's a hard space. Asking ourselves, wait, why do I feel this? Why is my heart suddenly beating really quickly? Why are my palms sweating? Why am I like cotton mouth? Like what's going on in me that I'm feeling these things, or feeling angry or frustrated all the time? Starting to just wait, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go for a quick walk, or I'm going to go sit down and I'm going to spend some time just like asking myself a couple of questions, figure out what the story is I'm telling myself, and then ask God, is this true? What do you say? Like, I think for me to do that, and with a journal, being ready with a journal, is this true? What do you say? Now, I have a lot of years of like school and space, like with God, that I could say, I know the character of God well enough to know that God's not going to hammer me. God's going to show love and kindness. And the fruit of the Spirit is from God, so that will be in the response, right? And so I can unedited just write whatever I feel and hear in that space. And then if I'm not sure, I can go to those trusted people and ask, okay, will you pray with me? Or what do you think when you hear this? Does this resonate? So
I think I get nervous about using my voice, living out my calling more when I've shifted my focus to trying to measure success so that I can not fail. And I've taken my focus off of the growth or the lesson or the refining that's a part of whatever it is that I'm doing. That has become secondary, and the result or the way I look in it or something has become primary. That's when I fight that feeling to pull back, or I have days where I'm just like, I think I want to quit this or something. I'm like, well, that's because I know this about myself and I still do it. But that's because right now you're focused on the outcome, the result, the measurable thing, and you've lost sight of why you're called, if you will, to be who you are, as if that's not good enough anymore.
Those are shame versus guilt moments.
Yes.
It's the character versus behavior.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was my bad. I forgot this.
Yes. And to paraphrase Brene Brown, in case anyone watching doesn't, Brene says, guilt says I did something bad, and shame says I am bad. And that was hugely eye-opening for me when I'm like, oh, I might need to reconcile, fix, ask for forgiveness, something, right? Because I might have made a mistake. The core of who I am, Jesus is in me. That is incorruptible. That is good. That is light. I am not bad. I might have done something bad and I need to try to fix that. But those two things are very different, but we don't live as if they are too often.
The reality is with the guilt versus shame, or the I did something bad versus I am bad, is that there's action available for you if it's guilt. There's not action available for you if it is shame. And so I can correct, like you were saying, if I realize, oh, I made a mistake, and note to self, that is good leadership. That is always good self-leadership. That is the best self-leadership, to be able to say, oh, I did that wrong, and now I'm going to work it out. I'm going to figure it out. Or I'm going to ask people for support. I'm going to ask for help. Versus, no, I guess I'm just bad. And I'm not
and I should quit because I'm no good at, Before I let you go, Trisha, what are you, always like to end on this question, what are you maybe just reading, watching, listening to, studying, anything like that that's going on in your life that's kind of keeping you connected to God?
That's good. I would say probably the study thing right now, one of them, well, I'll start with where I'm at. First thing that came to my mind is the Pray As You Go podcast. It's short. It's a daily, like, music, scripture, thoughtful, like imaginative prayer sometimes. It's really lovely. And so I usually start a walk. I go walking in the mornings with that.
I'm so grateful for you to have spent this time with us. And I'm grateful for your work in what I think is for me anyway, has been very tangly, mucky space in my heart. And I really appreciate conversations with people who are just willing to sit in that space and say, it's okay, we don't have all the answers. I feel the call of God on my heart. I want to be obedient to that. I'm struggling to understand what that looks like. So Thank you for being a voice around all of that. It's very helpful to us.
I'm glad to. It's an honor to be with you. I love doing this work. It's a gift. I feel like I get to be a part of.
You are a gift. We thank you, Trisha, for being here with us. Thank you guys for those who are watching live. Maybe for those who pick this up later, we are going to see you later. We'll be done for now. And until next time, peace. I love how Trisha reminded us that using our voice doesn't necessarily mean we are loud. Sometimes quiet words or gestures are much more powerful. Speaking up when we'd rather stay quiet, or staying quiet when we'd rather speak out, can be how we powerfully live out our unique calling. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.